And now the conclusion of Friday the 13th, The Mask of Jason Voorhees. Chapter 31, Into the Fire. Jason brought his machete down for a third time, severing the highway patrolman's spine and cutting him completely in half at the waist. "Oh my God!" the patrolman said, blood dribbling from his lips. "Oh my God!" Jason looked down at the victim and cocked his head. Silent rage flowed through him like the blood through his veins. These policemen thought he was stupid and that they could trick him like the soldiers did before, but he was too smart for them. With that thought, he kicked the patrolman's lower half, causing his victim's organs to dump from both halves onto the muddy ground. The patrolman gurgled for a few moments before his eyes glazed over, and he became silent and still. Jason looked into the woods and focused his senses. He would track down the rest of the policemen hiding in the woods. After that, it would be time to take out the rest of these intruders to his camp. Micki looked out the doorway of Cabin 7 at the chaos of scrambling sheriff deputies, highway patrolmen, and state troopers before her. Over a dozen officers were shoveling dirt over the tarp that covered the pit they had dug in front of Cabin 1. She looked around and managed to find Ryan in the shuffle and storm. He was following Sheriff Landis and that female highway patrol officer. She thought Landis had called her Jackson. The three of them walked along the horseshoe of cabins and headed up the 3 steps leading to Cabin 1. Trooper Jackson was holding a walkie-talkie up to her ear and appeared to be yelling into it, though at the distance she was from, Micki couldn't hear a word that was being said. Micki looked back at her 2 companions in the cabin. Morgana was still laying still and unconscious on the weathered-looking bed on the right, toward the back of the cabin. The deputy who was guarding them, whom she found out after much prodding was named Pat Colby, was sitting on a folding chair next to the bed looking very frustrated. "Shit, man, I should be out there," he muttered to himself while rhythmically tapping the outer casing of the AK-47 he had laying across his lap, on the arms of the folding chair. "Shit!" Micki knew how Officer Colby felt. She also felt totally helpless and could feel the tension building around her. At any moment the situation would explode, and what would she do then? What could she do? She looked out the doorway once again and wished Ryan was there to comfort her. "Davis, Lookout 1, do you read?" Trooper Jackson yelled over the storm into her walkie-talkie. "Davis, answer me. Status?" She nervously looked over at a very displeased Sheriff Landis and shook her head. "Damn it!" Landis cursed. "That bastard has taken out every lookout we have out there. How the fuck are we going to be able to know where that son of a bitch is going to be coming from?" Then, as if in answer to Landis's inquiry, they heard branches breaking from the woods and the sound of yelling. "Over there!" Ryan said excitedly, pointing at the area of the woods just beyond Cabin 12. A tall, bulky figure came charging out of the woods. The law enforcement officers immediately started firing. None of them had taken the time to notice that the figure was in a brown highway patrol uniform, nor the female form draped over his shoulder. Bullets struck Roy Turner's bulletproof vest, but this did little to help the rest of his body. Dozens of shots hit him in the arms and legs. His left leg was completely blown off at the knee. Also, there were so many shots to his head that there wouldn't be enough of his face left for identification. Carol Martinez was hit several times in the legs and rear end. Blood strayed from her wounds. She screamed in agony, and thankfully passed out before both she and the bullet-ridden body of Roy hit the ground. As Turner hit the ground, Carol flipped off his back and landed hard on the blood-covered muddy ground beneath her, splattering mud to either side of Roy's body, and landed hard on her legs, causing her body to jerk one more time as her already beaten pain receptors took another final jolt. "Hold your fire!" Sheriff Landis yelled, stomping down the stairs from cabin 1 as he did. He continued to yell as he reached the bottom and came close to the mud-covered tarp that hid the pit in front of him. "God damn it, I gave you an order!" The sound of gunfire died and the campground became uncomfortably quiet. "Get some help over there!" Landis ordered, pointing at the bloody pile laying in the mud near cabin 12. "We've got injured people!" After the gunfire started, Deputy Colby ran up to the doorway. "Stay back!" he ordered, looking back at Micki and waving her back. Reluctantly, Micki did as she was told and stood at the back of the cabin beside the bed where Morgana lay unconscious. Then, while Colby was distracted, a large, muscular hand came around the corner of the doorway, locked onto his head, and slammed it against the doorframe. The hulking figure of Jason Voorhees came into view. Pat Colby screamed out in pain as Jason continued to apply pressure to his head. Finally, there was the sound of crunching bone, and Colby's head exploded like a ripe melon. His eyes burst from their sockets. Blood sprayed in all directions. Some of it even hit Micki and Morgana in the back of the cabin. Micki let out a gasp, and Jason turned and looked at her. He released Colby's body and let it drop to the floor. Then Jason's good eye focused on Morgana's motionless body on the bed, and he cocked his head. Rage filled Jason as he looked at the trickster who was laying motionless on the bed at the back of the cabin. She had lied to him and tried to trick him into thinking she was his mother, like the blonde girl had done years ago. The blonde girl had hurt him and had gotten away. He wasn't going to allow that to happen again. He pulled his machete from where he had slipped it through his belt and started moving into the cabin. The red-haired lady grabbed the folding chair and threw it at him. He batted it away like it was nothing, which it was. "Help!" the redhead screamed. "He's in here! He's in here!" The noise of her screaming was annoying him. Jason figured he'd simply chop her down before ramming his machete through the trickster's chest. It was going to be too easy. He lifted his machete. State Trooper Scott Christopher heard a woman scream from cabin 7. He'd seen earlier that the sheriff had sent 2 of the survivors there with a deputy. As he approached the cabin, he saw blood on the doorway and the crumpled body of the deputy laying halfway in the doorway. He rushed up to the open door, his assault rifle at the ready. It took him a moment for his eyes to adjust, but when they did, he saw the hulking figure of Jason with his back to him, his machete lifted over his head. He could also see that Jason was closing in on 2 women at the back of the cabin. He noted that the red-headed woman was using her body to shield the other lady, who was laying unconscious on the bed. "Get out of the way!" Trooper Christopher yelled at the redhead as he aimed his rifle. The woman immediately jumped and rolled over the bed. She grabbed her companion as she went by, and they both went tumbling over the side of the bed onto the floor. Jason turned toward him, just as Trooper Christopher unleashed a barrage of bullets that hit the hulking figure square in the chest. The impact sent Jason stumbling backward and slammed him against the wall. Trooper Christopher was amazed. With anyone else, that many hits to the chest would have been instant death. But with this fucker, it barely even stunned him. He even noticed that there was barely a dribble of blood coming from the wounds. What the fuck is he thought. Jason pushed away from the wall and lifted his machete. Even at a distance, Scott Christopher could see the rage run through Jason Voorhees' body. He knew he was now Jason's target. As if to confirm this, Jason started stomping toward him. Trooper Christopher quickly backed away from the cabin doorway into the courtyard. He shot off another barrage of bullets, but this time Jason was ready. The impact barely knocked him back a couple of steps, but still he continued forward, building speed as he went. Jason grabbed his machete with both hands and lifted the rusty blade over his head in preparation for delivering a killing blow. In a vain attempt to shield himself, Trooper Christopher held his assault rifle up in front of him, but it did little to deter the inevitable. The instant the machete struck the rifle, there was a sharp cracking sound as the bones in Scott Christopher's hand shattered. The rifle slipped from his broken fingers, hit him in the chest, and fell to the ground uselessly. He barely had time to let out an agonized scream before Jason brought the blade down a second time and split Scott Christopher's head down the middle. Blood shot like a fountain to either side of him as his body stumbled to either side. Jason stood and watched as Trooper Christopher stumbled backward and fell into the mud. Suddenly he heard a number of sharp cracking sounds like the firecrackers Mama used to get for the 4th of July. He felt stinging pain as bullets struck his body, seemingly coming from every direction. His body vibrated from the assault and his rage blazed. He would make all these policemen pay for hurting him. He'd cut them all down like he did the ones in the woods. He saw out of the corner of his good eye that a policeman in a brown coat was running toward him with the shovel lifted over his head. Jason swung his machete sideways and caught the policeman in the midsection, cleanly cutting him in half. The policeman's shovel came down and glanced off Jason's mask, causing the policeman's upper half to separate and fall backward into the mud. The policeman's legs continued to run for 10 more feet before falling to the ground. Then Jason heard a voice blare into the courtyard. He turned to look where the voice was coming from and saw a white-haired policeman standing on the porch of Cabin 1 with the bullhorn held up to his mouth. "Damn it, I said hold your fire! This son of a bitch is mine!" Jason cocked his head at the man with the bullhorn. He remembered the white-haired man. Before he had gotten his body back after the army men had blown it up and was in the body of a policeman, he had seen the blonde girl, who was somehow family to him, had stabbed the white-haired man in the gut with the big knife his mama had tried to hurt him with years before. He was surprised to see the white-haired policeman standing in front of him. He was further surprised when he realized he also remembered the dark-haired man that stood next to the policeman. He had been the guy who helped the blonde girl fight him. He remembered when he was being pulled into the ground by that bad things that he nearly took the dark-haired man with him, but he had gotten away. Now he too was standing before him. Not this time, Jason raged, glaring at the both of them with his good eye. This time neither one would get away. He would make sure of that. "Hey, you ugly fuck!" the white-haired man yelled into the bullhorn. "You remember me? I can't forget you. You took somebody who was very special to me. Remember Diana? The poor woman who had the unfortunate luck of sharing the same bitch of a mother as you?" Rage boiled within Jason. The white-haired man had dared say something nasty about Mama. Jason started walking toward Cabin 1, his left hand clenched into a fist at his side, his other hand clutching the grip of his machete tightly in anticipation of the bloody work to come. "Come on, you son of a bitch!" the white-haired policeman continued to taunt him. "I'm right here waiting for you." But then as he drew closer, the ground fell out from under him, and Jason fell into a dark pit. He landed hard at the bottom of the pit. There was water at the bottom of this pit. It smelled funny. It smelled like Papa's tractor. He realized the white-haired man had tricked him. He had purposely got him mad so he would fall in this hole. Then the white-haired man spoke again. "Light him up!" The last thing Jason saw before he was blinded by the flames that enveloped him was a nozzle stuck through the opening at the top of the pit, and the stream of fire shooting out of it. Chapter 32. Invincible. Ryan jumped back as flames exploded out of the pit and burned away the tarp covering it. The flames jumped up 20 feet into the air and threatened to catch the roof of Cabin 1 on fire. "Burn, you son of a bitch!" Sheriff Lloyd Landis yelled down into the pit with a look of insane satisfaction on his face. Ryan looked at him and shook his head. "Ahab finally got his well," he said under his breath. Landis walked close to the edge on the inferno. Ryan was surprised the sheriff could tolerate the heat. "Go back to hell, you motherfucker!" Landis yelled. "Go back with that slut of a mother of yours!" Suddenly a flaming form came flying up out of the pit. 2 burning arms grabbed Landis's legs and pulled them out from under him. The sheriff fell backward and hit the cabin steps with the back of his head. Then his unconscious body was dragged into the flames and disappeared. "Sheriff!" Jackson screamed, dropping the bullhorn Landis had handed her. What the fuck just happened? Shit like that just doesn't happen! She screamed at Ryan as if saying it would make it so. It does here, Ryan said simply. Once again, the flaming form jumped out of the pit. This time, the burning arms were raised and held a red glowing blade. The blade slammed into the ground on the edge of the pit and it embedded into it. Steam shot up from the ground as the mud baked from the heat. The flaming figure slowly pulled itself out of the pit. Black ash fell away from its body, and the flames died in the rain to reveal undamaged cloth and flesh. That's not good, Ryan said. Micki stood in the doorway of Cabin 7 and looked in disbelief at the events playing out before her. She had witnessed the demise of Sheriff Landis. Now she watched as Jason Voorhees stood up totally unscathed by his flaming bath and almost casually pulled his still red-hot glowing machete from the ground. She knew both Ryan and Jackson would be the next victims. She felt totally helpless as Jason and the storm raged outside. The flames of resurrection still burn within Jason, Micki heard a familiar voice say from behind her. Rashid? She said, turning around, and was startled to find herself looking into the face of Morgana, whose eyes were rolled back into her head, so only the whites could be seen. Unfortunately, Jason cannot be destroyed by human hands at this time, Morgana said in Rashid's voice. All these brave law enforcement officers are doomed unless action is taken. Then what are we supposed to do? Micki asked. If I may be so bold, it is not we who can do something. It is you, Micki. The voice of Rashid said through Morgana. But what can I do? You underestimate your own power, Rashid's voice said. Jason cannot be destroyed, but he can be bound. You are the key to that. How am I the key? Micki asked, dumbfounded. I've only used magic once in my life, and I drained what power I had doing that. That was 20 years ago, the voice of Rashid said. It has been your power that Mrs. Voorhees and her associate have been tapping into. Then let them use it, Micki said. I don't know how. I have been with you from the start, and I will be with you at the end, no matter the outcome, Rashid said. Do you trust me, Micki? I have no choice, she said, looking out the door into total chaos. Jackson yelled at Ryan as she pulled her revolver from its holster. She let off 5 shots that hit Jason square in the chest without effect. Jason stuck his hand in his coat pocket and pulled out a red-hot metal tent spike. There was a soft crackling sound and smoke rose from his palm as he almost casually flung it at Jackson. The tent spike would have impaled her through the chest, but she was knocked out of the way by Ryan. She hit the wooden porch beams hard. She lost her grip on her revolver and it went tumbling over the side of the porch. Ryan landed on top of her, knocking the air from her lungs. The spike hit the wall and smoke started issuing from it the moment it embedded itself in the wood and the rain fell upon it. Ryan rolled off the top of Jackson and saw that Jason was coming up the steps to Cabin 1 after them. Looking around quickly, he saw the discarded bullhorn lying nearby. He crawled over to it and grabbed up the microphone. He knew he only had one option, though he didn't like it. Shoot him! He yelled into the microphone. Shoot! Immediately he heard the crackle of AK-47s firing and bullets hitting the front of the building. Come on, hurry! He said to Jackson, who was still trying to catch her breath. We don't want to be victims of friendly fire, he said as he started crawling toward the edge of the porch. Then, as if to emphasize his point, a bullet struck the board next to his leg. Jackson followed his lead. Ryan!" Micki screamed as the deputies and other law enforcement officers started shooting at Cabin 1. "We must put an end to this insanity," Rashid's voice said. "We must begin, Micki, before it is too late and more innocents die." "Tell me what I have to do," Micki said with desperation in her tone. "First, you must calm yourself," Rashid said, as Morgana went behind Micki and put her hands on Micki's temples. Immediately, Micki started to feel calmer. "You must open yourself up and listen to yourself. Listen to your body, your lungs breathing, your heart beating, the blood in your veins coursing. Can you hear them? Can you feel them?" "Yes," Micki said, simply. She had never been so aware of her own body. Even during times of stress and pain, she had never been as aware. Then she felt something deeper. It was a warmth beneath the sound and feeling of her body, like an undertone in a symphony. The more she acknowledged it, the warmer it got. Soon it felt like she was peering into a furnace. "I can sense you feel it," Rashid's voice said. It sounded hollow, like she was hearing it in a tunnel. "You feel the power surging within." "Yes, I feel it," Micki said. "This is very good," Rashid's voice said. "Now we can begin." Both Ryan and Jackson crawled themselves off the porch, onto the muddy ground. Deputies ran up to them and helped them onto their feet. "I need your weapon," Jackson said, grabbing the AK from the deputy helping her. Ryan grabbed the barrel of the rifle and stood in front of her. "You're wasting your time doing this," he informed her. "Take a good look. Bullets aren't having any effect on that bastard." Jackson pulled the AK-47 free from Ryan's grip. One of the deputies grabbed Ryan and pulled him out of the way. "Damn it, will you listen to me?" he exclaimed, pulling away from the deputy. "Just look at him. Does he look like he just came out of that fire pit?" He pointed at Jason, who was standing on the porch facing the barrage of bullets that were assaulting him still. Though he was vibrating from the impacts, all the bullet holes were immediately closing up, and even his clothes were repairing themselves. "Look at him! These damn guns should have ripped him apart! Look, damn it!" At that point, Jason pulled a handful of red-hot glowing tent spikes from his pocket and started throwing them at the officers shooting at him. The sounds of screaming and dying officers were added to crackle of rifle fire. Several officers were hit either in the head or the neck. One highway patrol officer got a spike in his shoulder. Another officer ran over to him and tried to grab onto the tent spike to pull it out. Smoke issued from his glove as the spike burned through it. The officer immediately let go, fell to his knees, and screamed in agony. His gloved hand continued to smoke, and the air filled with the smell of cooked meat. Jackson lowered her AK-47 and looked at Ryan desperately. "What the hell are we going to do to this guy? What are we going to do?" "We need to pull those officers back now," he told her, pointing at the remaining officers on the other side of the pit, who were still firing at Jason. "Jason has the upper hand, and we need to get out of here before this turns into a full-on massacre." "I believe we can bring the odds up in our favor," came a familiar voice from beside Ryan. It was Rashid's voice. Ryan looked and was startled to see Micki and Morgana standing there. "How the hell did they get here without us noticing them?" he asked himself. And where was Rashid? Micki looked like she was in a trance. She had her eyes closed and was standing statue still. Morgana didn't look much better. She was holding on to Micki's arm and was looking at them with only the whites of her eyes showing. "What the hell's going on?" Ryan asked. "What's wrong with Micki?" "Micki is getting in touch with her inner power," the voice of Rashid said from Morgana's mouth. "Really?" was all Ryan could get out of his mouth. It amazed him how at this point in his life, that stuff that would have bowled most poor humans over, he simply accepted as shop. "And what does all that mean?" "Micki is the key to binding Jason and keeping him from causing any more harm." Jackson looked at Ryan in total confusion. He fully understood this was a different world than the one she understood. "You get the troops to fall back," he told her. "Let the professionals deal with this freaky business, okay?" A look of relief came over Jackson. She looked over at the two deputies, who looked equally dumbfounded. "You heard the man. Spread the word to cease fire and fall back." "Yes, ma'am," both deputies said together and rushed off. "Good luck," Jackson said, looking at the trio with a mix of hope and incredulity. She handed Ryan the AK-47. "You might need this," she said. Then she headed off to instruct the troops. "So what do we do now?" Ryan asked. "Now it is up to Micki," the voice of Rashid told him. Micki had heard every word of the conversation, but it had sounded like it was coming to her from a distance. Morgana, who was channeling Rashid, had led her to Ryan. She could sense that Jason was near. It was like a cold breeze invading a bright sunny day. The energy she had discovered at her core as intoxicating. She wondered how she would ever return to the bland existence of the life she led outside her body. "Micki, it is time," Rashid's voice echoed to her. Micki opened her eyes. Even her vision had changed slightly. She looked at Ryan and saw a golden aura surrounding his body. "Are you all right?" Ryan asked. He must have noticed the odd look she had given him. "Better than ever," she said, smiling. "Ryan, we will need your assistance," Rashid said. "I know I'm going to regret this. What do you need me to do?" he asked. "In order for our plan to work, Micki and I need to use her power to connect with the elders. Only with their power joined with ours can we hope to bind Jason and send him back where he belongs," the voice of Rashid said. "We will need you to distract Jason while we make the connection. We must have as little distraction as possible if we are going to succeed in this." Ryan slipped the AK-47 Jackson had given him around his back, bent down and picked up a shovel one of the work crew had discarded. "Well, I guess I'd better get to work then," he said, looking over at Jason, who was still lobbing red-hot tent spikes at the retreating law enforcement officers. Ryan couldn't help but thinking, is it my imagination, or is he bigger than the last time I fought him? Chapter 33, The Final Power. Ryan walked out in front of the hulking 7-foot figure that was on the other side of the now smoking fire pit. All the law enforcement officers had retreated and were running through the gaps between cabins 10 through 12. Jason had thrown all his tent spikes and was watching the officers retreat, with his head cocked to his right. "Hey Jason, you ready for another round?" Ryan said, holding up the shovel in front of him. "Because I'm certainly not," he thought to himself, but he needed to put on a show and keep Jason away from the girls. "Remember the last time? My wife and I whipped your ass good." Ryan smiled at Jason, who simply cocked his head to the other way and stood motionless watching him. The only thing that showed Ryan that his words were having any effect on him was that Jason's breathing was getting heavier. "But it seems to me that you're a bit of a pushover," Ryan continued. "I mean, after all, didn't you also get your ass kicked by a little boy? Jarvis? Wasn't that his name? Yeah, Tommy Jarvis. He was 12 years old at the time. Big, tough Jason Voorhees, who got his ass kicked by women and little boys. What would Mama say to that?" And then, just to add a little more salt to his verbal slashes, Ryan started laughing at him. Even with all the smoke coming from the pit, Ryan was able to see Jason's good eye narrow in on him. Jason pulled his machete from his belt. He stomped down the steps from cabin 1 and made his way around the pit toward Ryan. Ryan moved back about 10 paces to give himself some fighting room. "How about the next county? That would be far enough for me," Ryan thought with amusement, shaking his head. But of course, this wasn't for his comfort. This was to keep Micki and Morgana safe and give them the time that they needed. After all, he really didn't need to actually fight Jason, just play decoy and keep from getting killed. Yeah, easy as cake. he thought, shaking his head again. Immediately after he got around the fire pit, Jason charged at Ryan, swinging his machete in an overarm death blow. Ryan barely jumped out of the way as the rusty blade slammed into the ground where Ryan had just stood. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled across the sky as Ryan stumbled to his feet, but had to throw himself backward as Jason made a horizontal swing at his midsection. Ryan swung his shovel and caught Jason's head right next to his right ear. There was a sharp clang from the impact, but little else. Jason turned his head and looked Ryan in the eye, rage burning in Jason Voorhees' good eye. Oh, fuck. Ryan managed to get out before he had to throw himself back again as Jason swung the machete horizontally in a backswing. Micki, you must remain calm and concentrate if we are going to make a connection to the elders, Rashid instructed her through Morgana's mouth, putting her hands on Micki's shoulders. But how will I know when contact is made? Micki said. You will know, the voice of Rashid said. Now concentrate and repeat after me. Ancient elders, guardians of light, creators of all creation, though we are insignificant lower beings, we ask of you to hear our plea. Micki repeated as instructed, and Rashid continued. We ask for your strength to help us undo the darkness that those opposed to our creation has set upon us. We ask you, O wise elders, to please let us know your will and your judgment. Upon saying the last part of the incantation, Micki felt something. It was subtle, non-verbal, yet it was utterly clear. If it had been relayed verbally, it would have simply been the word, yes. Then Micki felt even more. Besides the warmth of her own power, she now felt almost like a warm breeze swirling around her. It tickled her skin almost like static electricity does before the inevitable shock. She was sure her hair must be sticking up. The idea amused her. She looked down at her hands and was amazed to see the energy swirling around them. Contact has been made, Micki said. Ryan swung his shovel and deflected a downward stroke that would cut off his left arm. Then, while Jason was recovering from the impact, Ryan swung the shovel in a backswing and hit Jason squarely in his hockey mask face, sending the 7-foot-tall Hulk stumbling back 4 steps. How'd you like that one? Ryan managed to get out. He was out of breath and exhausted. This fight seemed to have been going on for an eternity. Jason gave him his answer with a backhanded smack to his chest that lifted him off the ground and sent him crashing down on his back into the muddy ground. Ryan was coughing and trying to get air into his lungs. The impact had totally knocked the wind out of him. He had to fight with all his will to keep from passing out. Jason almost casually walked over to him and looked down. Then he lifted his machete over his head. Ryan braced himself for the inevitable. Sorry, Micki, he thought. Suddenly there was a flash of light and Jason wasn't standing over him anymore. You keep your paws off my cousin, you son of a bitch! Came a familiar voice from behind him. He felt a soft hand touch his shoulder, and all his pain went away, and he could breathe again. He sat up and looked around. Jason was about 10 feet away, getting up on his feet again. The ground around him looked to be baked, like it had been put in a kiln. He looked to his right and saw Micki and Morgana. Morgana had her hands on Micki's shoulders, and the both of them were surrounded by a golden light. Micki's eyes were glowing intensely and looked like spotlight bulbs. Are you all right? Micki asked, concerned, kneeling next to him. I'm doing great, Ryan said, looking at the glowing, nearly angelic pair that was beside him. Definitely not as good as you two. I gather you succeeded in making contact with the higher-ups? You could say that, she said, smiling at him. Micki, it is time. We must not stay in this state for too long, the voice of Rashid told her from over her shoulder. Then let's lock and load, Micki said, standing up and focusing her attention on Jason Voorhees. Jason had just retrieved his machete from where it had landed several feet away after he had been sent flying. He was now stomping towards them, his chest heaving with rage. Micki and Morgana stepped forward a couple of steps. Micki's eyes narrowed and she lifted her arm and pointed toward Jason, who had quickened his pace and now looked like a charging bull. Ryan noticed that Morgana had started chanting some words in a tongue he had not heard before, but he guessed might be ancient Egyptian. Uma shakalamo kasham, Uma shakulama kasham, Morgana chanted in Rashid's voice. Then as Jason got uncomfortably close, Micki spat out, In the name of the elder gods, creators of this realm, I bind you, Jason Voorhees! Suddenly a light shot down from the sky on top of Jason's charging form, and he was stopped in his tracks. He pounded his fist on his enclosure of light, but it did no good. Then golden-colored energy tendrils came slithering down the tube of light. They wrapped themselves around Jason's arms and legs and binded them together. Jason dropped his machete and it fell into the mud at his feet. Ryan looked over at Morgana again. She was chanting faster now and sweat was covering her face. Uma shaka lamo kasham, Uma shaka lama kasham, Uma shako lamo kasham. Then Micki spoke again. In the name of the elder gods, guardians of light, I send you back, Jason Voorhees, from where you came. Immediately the column of light disappeared, and Jason fell backwards into the mud, the tendril still binding his limbs. Ryan had a prickly feeling on the back of his neck. He knew that something was coming. He got to his feet and looked around. He saw that another column of light had appeared some distance away, past cabin number 12. But what the hell is it doing back there? He asked himself. Behind cabin 12 were only the pier and the lake. Ryan looked over at Micki and saw that something was wrong. She looked like she was in distress. No, she screamed. No, not there. No, Micki, don't fight it, Rashid screamed. Don't fight it. Just then, another golden tendril shot out of the darkness between cabin 11 and cabin 12. It connected itself to one of the tendrils binding Jason's legs. Immediately, like being connected to a giant rubber band, Jason was quickly dragged through the courtyard and into the darkness of the gap between the cabins. Mud straying to either side of him as he went. A few moments later, the column of light receded and the golden glow around Micki and Morgana faded. Both girls immediately fell to the ground. Ryan bent down over them. Morgana pulled herself out from under Micki and looked up at Ryan with a quizzical expression on her face. Her dark eyes restored. "We are alive," she said, grasping her shoulders and arms. "Yeah, nice feeling, isn't it?" Ryan said, smiling. But then his smile dropped. Micki hadn't woken up, and she had started shaking. "This is not good, Ryan," Morgana said. Ryan would have asked her how she knew his real name, but Micki's eyes partially opened and saliva started dribbling from her mouth. Then the full spasms started. Micki felt that same feeling she had felt when she had been studying Pamela Voorhees' diaries the night before. All around her was a swirling vortex of colors. For a moment she thought she was dead, but something told her this wasn't the case. Was she still connected to the elders? The last thing she remembered was the golden aura around her dispersing. Something had gone wrong when she had done the incantation to send Jason back. She had tried to send him back to hell, but as she was doing that, she had a flash of her vision of the night Jason was resurrected. Then, for some reason, the energy column appearing at the Voorhees house in the Hellmouth moved the column, and it appeared at the lake near where Jason had drowned. "But I wanted to send that monster back," her mind screamed. "I'm sorry, dear.
"That is not in the plans," echoed the voice of Pamela Voorhees from around her. "It will be a long time before my son goes to his final rest. Yes, a very long time." Then, as if the vortex Micki was falling into was some sort of movie screen, images started to appear in front of her. She saw a burned man wearing a brown fedora and a red and green sweater facing Jason. The man had a glove on his right hand that had blades on the fingers. "Welcome to my playground," he said with a dark and evil chuckle. Micki knew him. She and Rashid had read reports mentioning him through Rashid's contacts with the Watchers Council and the Luna Society. It was Fred Krueger, the Springwood Dream Slasher. They had originally thought that Krueger's power had come from a cursed object, but after researching the matter they realized they were wrong. But why, Micki wondered, why would Fred Krueger have any interest in Jason? As if in answer, the image changed again. Jason was standing in front of Pamela Voorhees. "Oh, Jason, my special, special boy. Do you know what your gift is? No matter what they do to you, you cannot die. You can never die. You've just been sleeping. It's time for you to wake up. Mommy has something she needs for you to do. You must go to Elm Street. The children have been very bad on Elm Street and need to be punished," she said sweetly but firmly. "Rise up, Jason! Rise up and live again!" she ordered. Suddenly, Micki realized that what she was seeing was Jason's dream. Then she found herself in a muddy, vine-covered section of the lake. It appeared the lake had been partially drained. There was an abandoned buoy lying on its side nearby the partial mud-covered body of Jason Voorhees. Jason slowly and stiffly got up out of the mud and started walking away into the woods. Then Micki was thrust back into the dream again. She was standing in a clearing in the woods and Jason was walking past her. "This must be what Jason sees," she thought. "He is still partially in a dream state." Then she saw Pamela Voorhees. She was standing in the center of the clearing watching Jason leave. "Make them remember me, Jason!" Pamela screamed at him. "Make them remember what fear tastes like!" Then Pamela Voorhees transfigured into Fred Krueger. "Go, Jason. I've been away from my children for far too long." Micki heard Pamela Voorhees echo through the vortex again. "My son has many battles to face before his cursed existence can end. This was but one, but others will come in rapid succession." The image before Micki changed again, and this time a chill went through her. Before her was Ryan, and he was fighting outside a dark-haired woman. The woman ran at Jason and jumped into the air and landed a flying kick to his chest. The impact sent Jason crashing backward, and the ground beneath him collapsed. Jason frantically grabbed at the edge of the hole he was falling into, but failed to get a grip. He slipped into the hole, and after several long moments, there was a distant sound of a thump. Ryan walked exhaustedly over to the edge of the hole and looked down into it. Then he put his hands on his hips, bent forward, and looked over at the woman. She was wiping some blood from her forehead with a handkerchief she had pulled from the back pocket of her jeans. She glanced over at Ryan and smiled. "We kicked his ass," she said with pride. "You okay, Faith?" Ryan asked. "Just a scratch," she said, with a gleam in her eye. "I'll be 5 by 5 in no time." Then the image changed once more. Jason had a dark-haired man with long hair by the throat. From behind him, a female voice spoke. "Jason." Jason turned to look at the source of the voice. Standing in the doorway of the barn they were in was a woman who looked amazingly like a young Pamela Voorhees. The woman was holding out a locket in front of her. "You must stop, Jason. It's time to stop." Jason looked at her with confusion. This gave the dark-haired man a chance to break away from him. The man immediately grabbed a chain that was hanging over a rafter and wrapped it around Jason's neck. He threw the other end of the chain into the blaring shredder behind him, and Jason was lifted into the air by his neck. The image changed again, but this time Micki let out a gasp. The image before her was Jason, yet it wasn't him. The background looked very futuristic, and so did Jason. From what she could see, one of Jason's arms and one of his legs were made of metal. As for his head, red eyes peered out of a fierce-looking silver mask. Pamela's voice echoed again. "Neither time nor technology can deter the curse from its course, but to all things they must come to an end." Suddenly, images flashed in front of her in rapid order. She saw a spaceship crash on a craggy planet. Then it changed to Jason in a battle with black-armored space troopers. Suddenly, Jason disappeared in a flash of light. A naked bald man appeared in a cylindrical glass chamber. In the chamber next to him, a prosthetic metal arm, leg, and metal mask appeared. And finally, and most frighteningly, in the chamber next to that, a black slithering ooze appeared and tried frantically to get out of the chamber. "Pay attention, dear," Pamela's voice echoed. "This is pivotal." The image changed to a woman kissing the bald man. Micki realized she saw the woman in the other image. She had been the person at the controls of the teleporter. The image changed to the bald man who was breaking open a clear container that held the slithering ooze. The ooze covered the bald man. The ooze began entering his body through every opening. The man spasmed as the ooze disappeared inside of him. Then his body started to distort and change. Micki realized the man was changing back into Jason. Then Micki heard a woman's voice. It was the woman from the teleporter. The woman the human Jason had kissed.
"Jason."
Jason had smashed into the middle teleporter chamber and had grabbed up the silver mask. He looked at it for a second and then he put it on.
"Jason,"
the woman said.
"It's me, Jason, Victoria. You remember me, Victoria."
Jason picked up the large silver-colored blade from beside the abandoned metallic arm. He looked over at the woman and cocked his head.
"Forgive me,"
she said, tears in her eyes, as she pressed a remote control. Jason disappeared in a flash of light. The woman dropped the remote. Her hand went to her stomach. She rubbed it and cried. The image changed to what looked like an ancient stone structure. There was a large, futuristic-looking cylindrical object with two rings looping around it in the middle of the structure. A red, long-haired woman was fighting with Jason. She was holding a long dagger that looked long enough to be a short sword. She brought the blade down and stabbed Jason in his chest. Jason stumbled backward several steps but remained standing. He pulled the blade from his chest and black blood started to flow heavily from the wound. He turned and started walking toward the cylindrical object. The two rings slowed and stopped. Then the cylinder opened and an intense light shined out of it. The woman stood and watched the events playing out before her. Jason walked up into the light from the cylinder and slowly walked up to the opening. Then things really happened fast. The woman charged at Jason. She quickly retrieved the dagger from the ground. Jason stood and turned away from the light in the cylinder. He opened his arms wide to either side of him and cocked his head. Behind Jason, several squid-like tentacles started to slide and wriggle their way out of the cylinder. A couple of the tentacles grabbed onto Jason's arm and started to pull him backward into the cylinder. The woman stopped in front of Jason and raised the dagger. "I give you peace and free our family of the curse." Then she plunged the dagger one last time, and when it entered his chest, the blade glowed and energy was released. The woman let go of the blade and jumped back. Her hand was smoking, but she didn't seem to notice. The energy from the blade started to cover Jason and consume him in light. The woman backed up a few feet. Then she turned and started to run out of the structure. Jason was aglow. The tentacles were smoking and receding back into the cylinder. But before they could, Jason exploded, releasing golden-colored energy that completely destroyed both the cylinder and the structure, leaving only a deep crater in its wake.
"This is the end of Jason?" Micki asked. "How can this be?" "Remember what your cousin told you, what Creighton Duke told him," Pamela's voice instructed her. "Oh my God," Micki said, the realization hitting her. "By a Voorhees was he born. Only by a Voorhees can he die. Oh my God, that woman was his daughter?"
The storm had ended and Ryan held his cousin's jerking body. He felt totally helpless.
"Micki, don't do this. Don't do this,"
he said, tears flowing down his cheeks. "We are very sorry, Ryan," Morgana said, kneeling beside him and putting her hand on his shoulder comfortingly. "We wish we had the power to help you." Suddenly, Micki pulled away from him and let out a loud gasp. Ryan and Morgana were caught by surprise and ended up falling backward into the mud. "Micki!" Ryan yelled, fumbling up out of the mud. "How long was I gone?" Micki asked, looking back at him, while wiping the saliva from her chin. "A few minutes," he told her. "I thought you were dying." "I wasn't sure what was happening," she confessed. "For some reason Pamela showed me the future." "So, what does the future hold?" Ryan asked. "All I can tell you is the legend of Camp Blood is going to go on for a long time to come. A very long time." "It is a very good thing that you are all right, Micki. We were very concerned," Morgana said, smiling at her. "Okay, what's the deal with that?" Ryan asked, his tone demanding. "What the hell is all this we business? You got a frog in your pocket?" "Ryan, what's going on?" Micki asked, looking from him to Morgana. "Ask her," he said, pointing at Morgana. "I'm as confused as you are." "Unfortunately, I have to inform you that Rashid stayed too long," Morgana told them. "Rashid?" Micki said, totally amazed. "Is that you?" "No," Morgana said simply. "Rashid is no more, as is Morgana Blackthorn. The person you see before you is both and neither of these people. Rashid knew the risk, but he also knew you would not have succeeded if he had not taken the risk." "Shouldn't Morgana have had a say on her future?" Ryan asked accusingly. "Unfortunately, for a medium like Morgana, each time she used her gift, it weakened her life force. When Rashid entered her, he found her life force very weak. He had doubted she would have survived even if he hadn't used her body. He had actually been surprised she lasted long enough for Micki to make contact with the elders. What he hadn't known was that Morgana had been aware of what was going on and fought to keep going." "So if Morgana was in such a bad state, why the hell are you doing so well now?" "That is a very good question," Morgana agreed. "It was the elders, right?" Micki said. "Their power was running through us. It must have healed you." "That sounds very logical, Micki," Morgana said. "Okay, that's solved. Now can either of you tell me where Jason is?" Ryan asked. "He's in the lake," Micki told him. "I thought we were going to send him back to hell," Ryan said. "I tried, Ryan, but for some reason the vision I got of Jason's resurrection, it flashed through my mind and that was it," Micki told him. "Also, Ryan, it has been established that Jason never went to hell," Morgana corrected him. "And what's to stop him from getting free next week and killing more campers?" he asked. "Me," Micki said. "As long as I live, he will be bound at the bottom of that lake." "Then my suggestion is to retire from the curse antiques business," Ryan said. "You know I can't do that," Micki said. "You need not worry, Ryan," Morgana told him. "I will watch over Micki, like I have since Jack died." "That was Rashid, and he's dead," Ryan pointed out. "I have his knowledge and his power," Morgana reminded him. "Also, I believe this might be the reason for this second chance." Ryan looked over at Cabin 12 and thought about the lake beyond and what was lying at the bottom of it. Let's hope so. Epilogue. Ryan put the last of Micki's bags into the trunk of her red Mustang. He looked over at Rashid's yellow VW Bug and wondered if Morgana was going to take ownership of the vehicle. After all, it was in a way partially hers. It seemed odd to him that this person he really hardly knew, besides having spent the night protecting her from Jason, knew personal details about him and his cousin. He heard the front door slam shut and looked over to see Micki with Morgana in tow. Morgana had a camouflage army bag that she was carrying over her shoulder in a very non-feminine fashion. She was wearing a black pentagram t-shirt and a pair of ripped jeans with black and white tennis shoes. Her hair was pulled back into a ponytail and tied with a black cord. Her face was clean and totally devoid of the black eye makeup and dark red lipstick she had worn in her former existence. She went up to Micki's car and flopped the bag off her shoulder and into the back seat. She looked over at Ryan, a troubled look on her face. "I feel naked without my fez, but it would not be an appropriate fashion accessory, given my current state." "Well, what can I say? Given the fashion trends I've seen lately, I wouldn't be too sure," Ryan said with amusement. "By the way, what do I call you now? I don't think the name Rashid fits you anymore." "I am who I appear to be, Morgana Blackthorn. The mystic Rashid is dead. I am simply the inheritor of his legacy, much like you and Micki were with your Uncle Lewis." "We inherited Uncle Lewis's curse," Micki stated. "I inherited Rashid's responsibility to assist you in putting an end to Lewis's curse," Morgana told them. "The war continues, and for every warrior that falls, a new one must be found. That is the way of things." "But what about Morgana?" Micki asked. "Doesn't she have any family that will miss her?" "Not now that Julius is dead," Morgana said, a sad look on her face. "We were all we had. Both our parents gave us up for adoption." "Well, welcome to the family, Morgana," Ryan told her. "I already am, Ryan," she said, looking at him questioningly. "Okay, I'm trying to get over the whole sex and body change thing," Ryan told her. "As am I," Morgana reminded him. "We should get going. We got a long trip ahead of us," Micki said. "Indeed we do," she agreed. Ryan definitely would never get used to Rashid's formal speech pattern coming out of Morgana's mouth. "Are you sure you won't come with us?" Micki asked. "No, I need to find Jessica and my daughter," he reminded her. "We could definitely be of assistance," Morgana offered. "We all know what would happen. I'd get involved with tracking down Lewis's cursed objects again, and all thoughts of finding my family would fall by the wayside. I'm not willing to let that happen, guys." "Then may the luck of the ages be with you, my friend," Morgana said, in a very disturbingly Rashid way. Micki had tears in her eyes. "Now you keep in touch with me. Write me a letter. Call me on the phone, Ryan. Do something." She kissed him on his cheek. "I don't want to lose you again." Ryan laughed without humor. "What, me?" he smiled. "You know me, Micki. I'm indestructible. Look at how I kicked Jason's ass. Again." "I wouldn't brag too much. You had your big tough cousin to step in," she told him. Then she motioned at Morgana, and they both got into the Mustang. A few moments later, there was the roar of the car's engine, and the Mustang took off down the muddy road, leaving grooves in the road in their wake. Ryan watched them leave. He felt a slight chill and knew this would be the last time he would ever see Micki. Jason lay trapped, bound by the now invisible bonds that held him motionless at the bottom of the lake, next to the chain that kept the buoy in place. He knew soon he would fall asleep again, like he had done in the past, and remain that way until he was set free. He looked out in the murky water, but didn't see anything, not even a fish. He heard a voice in the back of his mind. It was screaming. The other thing that was with him all the time told him that the voice belonged to the person who once owned the body he now inhabited. Jason listened to the scream. It seemed to get softer by the moment. The other thing told him that it was only an echo, a remnant, of the person that would soon disappear, like the person it belonged to. Jason continued to listen. It was comforting. It would be like a lullaby that would lead him into sleep. "I don't believe in you!" the dark-haired woman in the bed screamed, pulling on the restraints on her hands. The woman's legs were covered in blood, spotted bandages, yet they also had restraints on them. Nurse Claudia Hawthorne watched her as she filled the hypodermic with the sedative. She wanted to get it ready before the doctor arrived. The least amount of time she had to spend with that man, the better. He gave her the creeps. "I don't believe in you!" the woman screamed again. "You hear me? I don't believe in you, so you can't hurt me." Suddenly there was a light rap at the door, and a thin salt-and-pepper-haired man in a white doctor's coat came in carrying a clipboard with the chart attached. He looked over at Nurse Hawthorne and smiled a closed-mouthed smile.
Good afternoon, Claudia. And how is our patient doing?
She hated how he got familiar with her. Though in appearances he seemed like a very friendly and soft-spoken person, there was something darker and more sinister beneath that quiet facade. Why else would he have a child in a psych ward with adults? She thought, thinking of the patient at the end of the hall. "She seems really agitated, Doctor," she told him. "I set up a sedative."
Very forward-thinking,
he complimented her. Hawthorne picked up the syringe, but the doctor held up his hand.
Let's not be in such a rush to sedate this young lady,
he said.
Let's take a moment so we can get to know her a bit.
The doctor walked over to the bed and looked down at his patient.
Hello, Carol,
he said, smiling down at her.
I'm Dr. Wimmer. I'm here to help you.
I don't believe in you, she screamed in his face. Nurse Hawthorne doubted the woman even realized the doctor was there.
Who don't you believe in, Carol?
Dr. Wimmer asked in a calm, simple, matter-of-fact way. The woman looked up at him and her eyes narrowed. You know who he is.
No, I don't,
he said with amazing sincerity. Hawthorne was impressed. You just want me to talk about him so you can get me to believe in him, she said, glaring at him.
Now why would I want to do that?
He asked. If I believe in him, then he can get me, she admitted.
Who can get you, Carol?
Wimmer pressed. I can't tell you his name, she said, tears streaming down her cheeks.
If you don't believe in him, then he has no power over you, and you can say his name without fear,
Wimmer told her. She looked up at the doctor with a look that was a mix of hatred and fear. Jason, she told him. Jason Voorhees. Dr. Wimmer motioned to Nurse Hawthorne. She came over with the syringe in her hand.
Take good care of this young lady. She has taken an important step in her recovery,
Wimmer told her. No! The woman screamed. No, you tricked me into saying his name. I don't believe in him. I don't believe in him. Hawthorne put the syringe down on the bedside table and grabbed the woman by her arm. In her other hand she had a cotton ball soaked in rubbing alcohol. She swabbed a small section of the woman's upper arm. Then she picked up the syringe again and carefully stuck the needle into the woman's soft flesh. She slowly pushed the plunger and then pulled the needle out.
There you go, Carol. You get some sleep and we'll talk later,
Wimmer said, lightly rubbing the sweat-soaked hair on the top of her head. The woman jerked her head away, but it seemed obvious that the sedative was starting to take effect by how slowly she did it. After Nurse Hawthorne put a bandage over the injection puncture, she noted that Dr. Wimmer had silently departed the room. Good riddance, she thought. Dr. Wimmer walked down the hall of his private ward. Once he got to his office, he'd call General Carey and inform him of his new acquisition. It was important that he give the impression that he was making progress. He needed to keep his government associates happy. It made his job that much easier, especially when it came to getting the cooperation of local agencies. He smiled at the memory of how pissed Dr. Price was when he informed him that he was taking over the Carol Martinez case. He could see that Price had wanted to challenge him on this, but he was too afraid of the consequences of such actions. He knew he had made many enemies among the staff here at Cunningham County General since he had arrived 6 months ago. But he didn't care about that. What was important was that he was getting close to his goal, Jason Voorhees. What he had learned 5 years ago in New York was just the tip of the iceberg. Jason, or more correctly, the organism in his blood, held the key to total body regeneration, to put it simply, immortality. He was going to get that gift and bring it to the world. It would make him the greatest scientist in history. If that meant that he had to step on a few hick doctors, then so be it. As he walked down the hall, he looked at the name cards on the doors and thought about all the people behind those doors. Each of them was a piece in the puzzle of Jason Voorhees. Together they created a sort of family unit, with Wimmer as the head. They were all his children, and it was his job to keep them safe because of what was in their heads. Their names sang out to him as he passed their doors. Summer Stone, Russ Johnson, Carly McDonnell, Tommy Jarvis, Sean Robertson, Rennie McCulloch, Tina Shepard, Megan Garris, Jessica Freeman, Stephanie Freeman. He turned and looked back at Carol Martinez's door. He'd have to put up her name card when he returned. He smiled.
Welcome to the family, Carol.
The end.
Final thought. Well, hello, reader. As I said at the beginning of this book, it has been quite a ride. At the time of my writing this, it has taken me 7 years to write this book. In the past 7 years, a lot of things have happened. I worked on the script for an anthology film titled The Horror Seasons. A fan of my books named Corey Stevens made a movie adaptation of Mother's Day. I helped him with the script and actually played the voice of Pamela Voorhees in the film. I finally got my sci-fi novel, The Traveler: Conflict of Interest, published, though I had to self-publish it. My books finally got a bit of respect they deserve because Peter Brake mentioned them in his book Crystal Lake Memories. But that was in the second printing and only after I bitched my head off. Which reminds me, Peter's publicist never sent me the copy of the second printing that they promised me after my interview had been left out of the first printing. Also, after years of battling Morse bashers, I've gotten the questionable honor of being nicknamed the Harlan Ellison of Friday the 13th. But even with all this questionable publicity, it has led me to finally get my first interview. Thank you, Gorezone. And even eventually to me becoming an internet radio show host. Now, of course, some of these projects are also the reasons why it's taken me so long to finish this book. Well, that and long days at work doing data processing and research on a computer. But I've also had time to make this book better than I could have if I had just pumped it out in a mad rush. And I thought you deserved better. So here is the finished product of The Mask of Jason Voorhees. Some of you will love it, some of you will absolutely hate it. But at least the story is now told. Enjoy. Here is a bit of an update. It's 14 years later. Since writing this book, I've had some amazing things happen in regard to this book series. I've had a number of comic book companies come to me about doing comic adaptations of the books. Unfortunately, with Berkeley Books out of business and all the rights of the book supposedly in the hands of Penguin Putnam, this idea quickly died. Then, of course, Kane Hodder's associate, author Mike, tried to get the rights to the books so that he and Kane could reprint the books as part of a new publishing house they planned to open. Of course, Penguin shut them down on this idea really quick. But I have set up things so that the series will be available to future generations. I took copies of the books, including a printed copy of The Mask of Jason Voorhees, and donated them to an archive project called the Alexandria Project. This project protects the books and will make digital copies as well as keep hard copies of the books. They will make the books available to the public through various online sites like Open Library. The series also lives on as independent audiobooks created by the fans. 2 of these sets of books have been done by a computer voice reading the books. The latest, though, has been personally narrated by Joshua Wayne LaRue, aka 80s Slasher Librarian. This series is definitely the best of the lot. So, as you can see, the Camp Crystal Lake novels live on. TTFN, William Pattison, a.k.a. Eric Morse.
Okay, guys, this has been Friday the 13th, The Mask of Jason Voorhees, by William Pattison, writing as Eric Morse. And that was him playing the part of Dr. Wimmer. Thought you guys might enjoy that. That was the author of the book, and also that was him talking in the final thought there. Guys, this has been a fantastic journey. The entire book series that he did, starting with Mother's Day, Jason's Curse, The Carnival Road Trip, and finally The Mask of Jason Voorhees. I loved it. He said some will love it, some will hate it. As a fan of the TV show Jason Goes to Hell and this book series, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I don't know what to say about it. The deaths were awesome. Jason, whenever he really came in after Phil was dead and Jason made his resurrection, Jason handled himself the way I would think Jason would. And then we got that awesome flash from Freddy versus Jason, Jason X, what would happen beyond Jason X. I mean, I loved it, you know, and I want to know what you guys thought of this book. I mean, I could go on and on about everything I loved about this book, but I would rather discuss it with you guys. You've heard my thoughts throughout the book. If you're listening to this on the broken up chapters, the broken up uploads, then you'll know my thoughts. If not, let me just say, I love the characters, I love the story, I love the plot, I love the death scenes, I love the way that the mask wearer was handled, I love the way that Jason was handled. You know, I thought it was karmic that Lewis, as soon as Lewis got his body, bam, he's dead. I'm happy to see that Rashid is still alive, kind of, in a way, and still going to be having adventures with Micki. God, I really want to see Ryan defeat Dr. Wimmer now, since Dr. Wimmer, if you noticed, has his wife and baby. So, yeah, that's something I would love to follow. I would love to know what happens next. You know, you could always just tell me that, William, if you're listening. You could just tell me what happened, if he got his wife and kid back. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for listening. Please, give your thanks to Mr. Pattison in the comment section. He made a really good book series, and this book, I can tell, was a passion project of his, and it was so entertaining. We are so thankful to you, Mr. William Pattison. Eric Morse, thank you so much. I look forward to our interview soon. And guys, I'm going to be doing that interview with him, and it will be the bookend whenever I put out the unabridged version of this book, which you may be listening to right now, because this will have the same outro. So yeah, guys, cannot wait for that. If you're listening to the unabridged version of this book, stay tuned, because the interview is coming up right now. If you're not listening to the unabridged version, it'll be out soon, and if it is already out, go check it out. This has been your friendly neighborhood 80s Slasher Librarian saying, thanks for listening, and thank you, William Pattison, for all of your hard work. It is greatly appreciated.
Hi. This is William Pattison, known to Friday the 13th fans as Eric Morris, and you are watching the 80s Slasher Librarian's narration of my book, The Mask of Jason Voorhees. Yeah. Enjoy.